I have a theory that you only know that something is bad because you were told that it was. Now, obviously, I'm not talking about morality or harming people or major crimes or anything like that. I do think that some things are deeply human and innate, and I'm sure that there could be a whole philosophy and ethics discussion on that topic alone. I just mean the smaller things, the personal things like opinions and beauty, the way that you see yourself when you look in the mirror. I think so much of it was just handed to us before we were old enough to decide if we even wanted it.
Hi guys, welcome back to Nadine's Corner. First of all, thank you so much for the response to the first episode. I really did not expect that at all. I was completely caught off guard, and I've been so touched by every single message that I've received. Thank you. And I also want to say thank you for giving me a little grace, because when I recorded and uploaded that first podcast, I was still planning on keeping this whole thing way more anonymous. I had planned to just post this on my Substack, but then eventually I shared it across other platforms like Apple and Spotify podcasts and YouTube. And honestly, the results and reach have been so much more than, amazing. It is way more than I was even expecting or would even cross my mind. And so thank you all so much. Thank you to every person that listened to that. And thank you especially to every person that sent me a message, whether I know you personally or not. It truly does mean so much to me. Thank you all so much. And yeah, I had planned on keeping it anonymous, but some really amazing people in my life who I love more than words and want to thank so much basically encouraged me to follow my own advice after making an entire episode about not talking yourself out of things. So here we are, a little less anonymous than originally planned, but I am so excited. So let's get started. Today's podcast is inspired by a Substack article that I had uploaded to my blog, and the article is called The Lens of the Beholder. But today we're going to dive into it a little further. We're going to talk about perception, specifically the lenses that we inherit before we're old enough to choose our own, and what it actually looks like to take that authority back. Because here's the thing that I keep coming back to. This is literally your life. You are the one living it, and somewhere along the way, a lot of us quietly handed over the controls of how we experience our own lives to culture or standards or to other people's opinions without ever really agreeing to do that. And so I think it's worth asking the question, says who? As I mentioned in the last episode, I recently graduated with a degree in neuroscience, and while neuroplasticity will probably always be my favorite neuroscience topic, vision neuroscience is such a close second. And okay, wait, allow me to nerd out for literally 1 second here to tell you why. And you're more than welcome to skip ahead if the details are not your thing. I promise I won't be upset. But vision neuroscience has always fascinated me because, get this, your eyes are not actually quote unquote seeing the world in the way that we think that they are. Your eyes are simply gathering information. So information in the form of light, color, movement, contrast. But the actual experience of seeing, that happens in your brain. The retina is a part of your eye that converts light into neural signals. And then these signals will travel through the optic nerve, which is just the name of the nerve that connects your eyes to your brain. And specifically, it connects your eyes to an area of the brain called the visual cortex. And the visual cortex is essentially where your brain constructs what you experience as vision. But what fascinates me about this is that this concept can be applied to everyday life, in the fact that two people can experience the exact same thing and walk away with completely different interpretations of reality. Because your brain isn't a camera, it's more of an editor. It takes what's in front of you and it filters it through your life, your memory, your emotions, your expectations, and just really everything you've ever been taught. But essentially, what I take away from this is that perception is never really neutral. You're always interpreting reality, not just receiving it. And that thought honestly used to mess with me so much when I first learned it. Because if the brain is always filtering and constructing, then what any of us calls quote unquote reality is really just the version of it that our brain decides to show us. We assume our perception is objective, but so much of it is just interpretation. Now, of course, I'm going to give you a personal anecdote to illustrate this concept. So here's a little tidbit about me. I'm Egyptian American, and it has been such a privilege to be a part of two cultures. It's shaped the way that I accept expectations and norms because I have seen firsthand how relative things are, how two cultures can directly contradict each other in its definitions of beauty, for example. And I saw this firsthand because growing up, a lot of my Egyptian features were constantly admired by my beloved Grandma Rita, who was not Egyptian at all. She was actually of Irish and French descent, born and raised in Grosse Pointe, Michigan, and just happened to marry into this big Egyptian family. And from the moment I was born, this woman would stare at me with these bright blue eyes and tell me how lucky I was that I had big brown eyes. Constantly. I mean, my mom always tells me that my grandma used to say that the best thing that could have happened was that my brothers and I got my mom's big brown eyes instead of my dad's green eyes. And I think that shaped me more than I ever realized because now, at the ripe age of 22, my first instinct when I see someone with big brown eyes is, wow, they are so lucky. Not because I decided that on my own, but because someone I loved handed me this lens at such a young age, and my brain, this incredible prediction machine that runs on pattern and repetition, just kept reinforcing that pathway every time I thought it. And that is neuroplasticity working in real time. The more a thought gets repeated, the more automatic it becomes, and the more it starts to feel like a fact. And here's the flip side of that. And this is the part that kind of breaks my heart a little bit, because I think that sometimes we don't realize something is good about us until someone points it out. Almost like we need permission to admire or see ourselves with a different lens. And I was actually listening to a Noah Kahan song while I was brainstorming for this episode, and there's this lyric that says, "Some will never know they're beautiful until the crowd points it out for them." And that's such a human thing, right? We sometimes need to hear it from outside ourselves before we believe it. But what a shame would it be? What a genuine waste to let constantly shifting standards and other people's opinions completely determine whether you get to enjoy your own life, whether you get to appreciate yourself, whether you recognize your own worth. Because here's the thing about beauty standards specifically. They are not fixed. They never have been, and I doubt that they ever will be. There were entire eras in history where fuller bodies symbolized wealth and abundance, where a strong, prominent nose was considered so beautiful it got immortalized into stone, where features that get criticized today were once the standard that everyone wished that they could obtain. And I think about this sometimes, and I genuinely find it so interesting. Like, imagine if people in these ancient times, if someone in ancient Greece or Rome had access to the cosmetic procedures that we have today. Do you think that someone with a small, dainty nose would go do surgery to make theirs more prominent so that it could be worthy of marble like those admired in their time? Or maybe those who were really skinny would use weight gain medication so that they could be admired as being worthy of wedding into wealthy families? And yeah, maybe this sounds really absurd to you right now, but that's only because we're attached to the standards of our specific moment in history right now. And that's exactly the point. Because if these standards change constantly, that means they were never objective in the first place. And so to that, I say, says who? This concept makes me think about a Twilight Zone episode that I had to watch in class in 7th grade. The episode is called Eye of the Beholder, and I still think about it until this day. The entire episode hides everyone's faces, and there's this woman undergoing surgery because society considers her horribly disfigured. And the doctors speak about her with pity and fear and disappointment, and they talk about how if the surgery fails, she'll basically be sent away from society. And then finally the bandages come off, and the doctors gasp. They state that the surgery has failed. But when the audience finally sees her face, she looks completely beautiful by modern standards. And then the camera pans to the doctors and nurses, and they're the ones that look distorted by modern standards. And nothing about this woman changed, it's just the perspective and environment that did. And that episode was so impactful on little middle schooler Nadine, because maybe some of the things that we desperately want to change about ourselves only feel ugly because of the environment we learn to see ourselves through. For example, in that episode, if that surgery had actually worked the way that they wanted it to, viewers would have considered it tragic, a loss, a waste of beauty even. And maybe someone somewhere would think that about the insecurities that you carry too. Maybe what you hate about yourself would be considered striking or beautiful or iconic or worthy of art, if only through another set of eyes. We get so used to looking at the same exact reflection every single day that we stop realizing how extraordinary it actually is. We normalize ourselves to ourselves. And I think the most personal version of this in my own life is with my eyesight. So, surprise, another story for you. At one point in my life, I genuinely thought that needing glasses was a superpower. I'm not kidding. I was 5 years old when I got my first pair, and I was thrilled. I had these bright pink glasses, and I loved them so much that later I got a matching pair for my American Girl doll, so she could also share this awesome superpower with me. And I never had a reason to think that needing glasses was a bad thing. My vision was inherited from both of my parents, so in my family, it was treated completely neutrally. And because nobody framed it negatively, luckily, I didn't either. And I thought I was lucky, because when life felt overwhelming, I would literally take my glasses off, because I believed that the blurry version of the world felt calmer somehow, like it was softer, kinder, less harsh. I genuinely thought that that was the world's natural state, and that I just had this superpower of accessing it. In fact, when I was little, sometimes I could tell that I was dreaming because everything looked too clear in the dream, which honestly sounds poetic now that I say it out loud, but I think that there's something really important in that. And okay, yes, eventually I did realize that poor vision is in fact technically a deficit, and it's not an actual superpower. But deep down, I still feel like it's this little inside joke with myself. And honestly, I'm grateful for this mindset because it taught me one of the most important lessons about perspective. Because nothing about my eyesight actually changed. It's just the way that I viewed it. And that reframe, where I decided that glasses were a superpower instead of a problem, that shaped the way that I experienced something every single day of my life. Glasses were inevitable. I was going to have to wear it every single day, but I genuinely enjoyed it and thought that I was so lucky, all because of a mindset, because no one told me that it was a bad thing. And that's the brain doing what brains do, reinforcing whatever story you keep feeding it, constructing the version of reality that matches your most repeated thoughts. And so the question becomes, which thoughts do you want to keep repeating? And I want to be really honest here for a second. I know that this can all sound so much easier said than done, and it is. We live in a world with social media and beauty filters and comment sections and everyone around us operating by the same cultural standards. And I'm not over here telling you to just wake up one morning and decide that none of that affects you. That's not realistic, and honestly, that's not really the goal here. Culture shapes us. That's the reality of being a functioning member of society. And even psychologists talk about these things that they refer to as schemas, these mental frameworks that your brain builds through repetition, environment, and the social feedback that you get. And once a schema is reinforced enough, it stops feeling like an opinion. It starts feeling like this truth that you live by. But here's what I actually believe. We have more power inside that process than we think, than we give ourselves enough credit for. Because there's a difference between absorbing a standard and ratifying it. You can notice a message coming in from culture and still ask yourself, do I actually believe this, or was it just handed to me? And that one question, that one little pause, is where your authority of your own life lives. I think there's a stage in life where something shifts, where you suddenly realize, wait, this is my life. I'm the one living it. So why am I letting everyone else determine whether I get to enjoy my life? And here's what I want to offer today, which is less of wisdom and more of something I'm genuinely working through myself. Why do we have to wait for that stage? Why does it have to come with age or some big life event? Why can't we just decide to start there now? Because how amazing would it be to realize at a young age that you get to write the measures you use to evaluate yourself? Not ignoring culture or society, Not pretending the outside world doesn't exist, but choosing to live by a standard that doesn't require you to harm yourself in order to meet it. Because, guys, this is literally your life. You are the one waking up in it every morning. You are the one who has to carry whatever you decide to believe about yourself. You are going to spend the entirety of your life living in your beautiful mind. Why not make it a comfortable experience? Because the truth is, you are going to live with yourself and your brain far longer than you will with any other person in your entire life. And think about it this way. If you had a person in your life, a friend, a family member, a partner, who constantly put you down, discredited every positive attribute you have, held you back from being your best, was intimidated by your success, you would call that toxic. And you would know that you deserved better than that. So why do we accept that from ourselves? There is always going to be someone out there who doesn't see your worth or doesn't appreciate how spectacular you are. Please don't let that someone be you. I believe that in every version of every story, you should be allowed to pick you, to become your own best friend. You have to be your own hype person, your own safe space. Because confidence isn't just believing you're attractive. It's trusting yourself. It's trusting that you were created perfectly, that every feature is perfectly proportioned with the rest of you. And I'll say it again, we get so used to our reflection that we forget how extraordinary it actually is. We forget that there is not one person out there exactly like you. Not one person with the combination of your specific mind and your specific face and your specific way of moving through the world. Not one. And listen, I genuinely mean this. I believe in you. But that should matter so much less to you than being your own biggest fan. Because the person who knows you better than anyone else in your life, aka you, should be the one telling you that you look perfect, that you're capable, that you are enough. So why not adopt a says who mentality? Not about everything, not in a way that hurts other people, but at least about the beliefs that you hold about your own worth. You think that feature of yours is a flaw? Says who? You think that you don't measure up? Says who? You think that the standard that you're literally killing yourself to meet is worth it? Says who? You get to decide how you see yourself within the larger world, and you get to adjust the lens that you were given. And as long as it's not harming anyone else, why not make it one that's a little kinder to you? And I want to close with this. At the end of the day, I am just a girl in her 20s who does not have everything figured out. And these episodes are honestly just as much for me as they are for anyone listening. I'm not claiming wisdom. I'm just thinking out loud with some neuroscience concepts and a lot of reflections. And I'm just sharing it with you. But if any of what I have to say positively impacts anyone, anywhere in the world, that means more to me than I can even describe. And so I ask you, before you rush to fix anything about yourself, pause. First ask who handed you that lens, and then ask if it actually deserves the authority that you've been giving it. Because maybe my superpower when I was younger was never about seeing clearly. Maybe it was always about learning that you get to decide what's worth seeing in the first place. Thank you guys so much for listening. Seriously, the support on this little project of mine already means more to me than you know. And I especially really just want to thank every single person who reached out to me after the first episode and shared their thoughts or told me how the podcast impacted them in some way. It means so much to me. And I don't think you guys realize how surreal it feels hearing that something that I almost kept to my small little anonymous community ended up resonating with people I know. And honestly, hearing your interpretations and reflections has become one of the best parts of this whole experience already. So thank you, truly. And feel free to send me topics that you'd want me to talk about in future episodes, because I really do love hearing your thoughts and perspectives and conversations around all of this. Okay, until next time, bye guys.